thank you, everybody. We have a robust panel for us today. We have 5 speakers who will be participating with us, and I think it really is a great cross-section of different talents that we'll be bringing to the table for our talks here today. Shuo Zhang in the middle has a consulting firm, Renascia Partners, that she has founded, and she is the CEO. An expert in the semiconductor, in the TMT space, really as a result of 30 years of experience on the operational level, on the supervisory board level. As you look at her bio, whether it's Cypress Semiconductors or Avago, Altera, LSI Logic, so much involved, and a great asset in terms of strategic focus and positioning of companies in M&A and joint ventures as it relates to China and globally. Next to Shuo, Weihang Wang is the chairman and the president of Beijing Teamsun Technology company, Shanghai Stock Exchange listed, a leading company in tech innovation, one of the great system integrators in China, most prominent position in mobile and financial services. Weihang is known for his innovation, and for example, in 2009, received the China Brand Award. Actually was in 2011, and also recognized by the China software industry as Outstanding Entrepreneur Laureate in 2009 as well. So from the accounting, from the advisory side, Venkat Swaminathan is with us today as well. He is the managing director in Deloitte's strategic and operations practice for over 13 years. He comes from industry as well. He is an expert both in the negotiation of, the diligence of companies in an M&A context, and also a specialist in post-merger integration as well. From BDA, which is the sponsor of the forum here today, Alex Ditchfield. Alex and I have worked together both in Shanghai as well as in New York, where he currently is. He has been an expert also in EU and China, having worked on the Asia Invest projects for the EU, and represents under various mandates Asian as well as US companies in sales and acquisitions. And also, and you have met Li Dongwei before, who is our chairman of the M&A Association.
Asia, in Japan.
In Japan?
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm looking forward to hearing from all of them. One of the things, Wang Wei had talked about Belt and Road, and I think that's the name of the subject of our panel today also. I want to talk about that, and I think we will want to drill down also into U.S. Investment by Chinese, and also FDI into China as well. And what a difference a year makes. If we had been here a year ago today, we would be essentially acknowledging, perhaps celebrating the fact that China for 2016 would be the #1 global cross-border M&A country. In 2015, China was #5, #1 in 2016. And indeed, in the United States for 2016, a record $46 billion US was invested by China in the US, more than double in 2015. But, what a difference essentially a year makes, in the sense that even in November of last year, we were hearing some rumblings from MOFCOM and others in China about irrational investments being made, FDI, foreign direct investment by Chinese companies outside of China as well, and the introduction of currency controls and a more rigorous process in terms of evaluating Chinese investment outside of China itself. So Those pronouncements actually were codified in August of this year and formally acknowledged by 3 or 4 of the leading agencies and government instrumentalities. But really, that process of risk control, of currency control, was implemented far before that. So where are we as a result of that? Well, M&A in the United States from China is off as compared to last year. In fact, U.S. M&A by Chinese companies is down 67% in the first 3 quarters of the year, if measured by announced deals. The dollar volume is somewhat less pronounced, only a 7% decline. But remember, there was an overhang of deals that were announced in 2016, like HNA's acquisition for $10 billion of the aircraft leasing portfolio. So, but also on a global basis as well. You hear from MOFCOM, for example, that Chinese global foreign direct investment has dropped 42% in the first 9 months of 2017, and the value of announced deals is down by 31%. So the question is, how, putting this in context, is this an aberration? Is this something now that because of the conclusion now of the 19th People's Congress, it will rationalize and return to a more normalized level? Where are we in terms of the outbound investment profile of China as it exists today? So Shuo, perhaps you have some thoughts on that.
First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm based in Silicon Valley and focusing on technology merger acquisitions, and many on the small size deals. Coming from my intense industry experience, where I've been from process engineer all the way to the executive level of corporate management, so I sort of understand the industry very well. So from that point on, I started to do merger acquisition, mainly focused on cross-border between China as well as the United States in the tech sector. So to respond to Selig's comment about the reduction on the M&A deals as well as dollar-wise, I actually see a different picture in Silicon Valley. There is no day go by and I don't see, on social media, there's somebody posting they're attending a competition on some kind of a startup in some kind of area. AI, various topics that is happening in Silicon Valley. And also, I live in Palo Alto, a small community that comparing to New York in terms of financial investment per se. However, Palo Alto is a very active VC concentrated area. I would say today I met with a whole lot of more Chinese investors that in Palo Alto than my entire life. I lived in Palo Alto for 20-something years. And now in Palo Alto, there is, you can't stop by any coffee shop or encounter, several Chinese investment firms that is in Silicon Valley funding startup companies, C round, B round, various money flow into those type of companies. I'm not sure any association is tracking how much money flow into this area. So therefore, instead of buying 100% of a company, and earlier somebody talked about partial investment and partial ownership of a company, which I've seen personally quite a bit happening in Silicon Valley. And that's one end from China money to US. In the same time, I also finding China money into US VC firms, where VC starting to investing into China startup companies. So money flowing from United States to Beijing and to Shanghai, to Shenzhen, to Hangzhou, where I see, innovative technologies studying fintech, internet, IoT type of technology investment happening over there, where US dollar is flowing into China. So I see both sides of the pictures. The one belt, one road kind of discussion here, I really thinking it's a globalization of money flowing and deal flowing, and I think in the rate and speed which I have never experienced in my life. So I think time is maybe slowing down today, but I'm pretty sure with those small investment happening in the next few years, deals will significantly happen. So.
On Belt Road itself, which President Xi convened the summit in Beijing in May, it's an extraordinarily ambitious undertaking. You're talking about 68 countries, only 7 of whom are advanced economies, 60% of the world's population, collectively the GDP equivalent of about 40% of the world's wealth. Emerging economies are projected to grow at 6.7% per annum. $5 trillion alone in infrastructure spending in those countries as part of this initiative between now and 2020. Mr. Wang, as a CEO of a large, prominent China-based company, as you look at acquisitions, as you look how to allocate your resources, perhaps share with us in the audience your experience in acquiring American-based companies, and also as part of Belt Road, how is that initiative of the government impacting your decisions as to where you're deploying your capital and your resources?
Thank you, Selig. Let me have an introduction about myself. I'm Weihang from Beijing, China. I founded this company about 18 years ago. Before that, I'm an engineer working in the institute, and we work. I went out with my 5 of my fellows, colleagues. We founded this company, and today our company is about 6,000 people in China, Southeast Asia, and Eastern Europe and US. And today we're becoming a leading IT service provider in China and all these areas. And also I'm the executive president of Beijing Software and IT Service Association, which have about 4,000 members in Beijing. So welcome everybody if you come to Beijing to find some in IT industry. We can work together through our association. I think you asked me 2 questions. One is how about the acquisition of M&A, what we do in US. This year we finished the 2 acquisitions in US, spending about $400 million US. One is an IoT connection chip design company, which funded by 4 Tsinghua University students who worked in the US, but they founded this company 6 years ago. Now they are the leading IoT chip company, connecting company in the world. They supply their chips to Amazon, to GE, to Philips, and also to Huawei and Xiaomi. And also another company, local company in Silicon Valley, they provided real-time big data analysis and supply chain and e-commerce search engine to the largest local US local like Macy's, Home Depot, like this retail and some finance companies. And what we are doing, we are trying to move our company to be a globalized company. Now we have, which I think back to the one road and one belt, and I think this is the trend. In 2,000 years ago, it's in Han Dynasty, the emperor sent Mr. Zhang Qian, let him go to the West and to export some Chinese traditional merchants like silk. So that's the original of the Silk Road. And today, I think the One Road and Belt is also to export the production ability of China, especially in the infrastructure ability to the area, to the connection between the Asia and Europe, the two large economic areas, through the Middle Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Europe. I think besides the resource of fund, of money and capital, and all this production ability, is from the point of view of the tech company, I think the human resources, especially the talented people, is a big issue for this One Belt and One Road. Like us, we have 6 offices in Eastern Europe, in Russia, St. Petersburg, in Ukraine, in Poland, and now this month we will have another office in Serbia. About 700 very talented young people. We can get the top 5% of the excellent graduate students from the university. And they are very, in Eastern Europe, they are very good at mathematics and physics. So they are very talented to do the IT service, especially in the big data analysis, to our customers in China and in US. And I think this is a triangle between China, US, and Europe. How to manage these talented resources to give the services to this economy. Thank you.
No, thank you. And it's interesting because you are now the owner of two U.S.-based companies, and its Ryoshin Group has an interesting statistic that as at the end of 2016, every day 140,000 individuals in the United States go to work for companies that are controlled by Chinese companies. And whether it's Nextier or other companies, the amount of contribution to job creation and to the regeneration of the Saginaw, Michigans, and other places in the country has been extraordinary. The 140,000 from Chinese companies is still significantly lower, of over 200,000 from Japanese companies that are controlled as well. But the U.S. has an extraordinary track record in terms of companies based here in the United States that are foreign controlled. More than 25% of all goods manufactured in the United States and exported from the United States are from companies that are controlled or owned by majority from outside the U.S. itself. So thank you for sharing that with us also. Venkat, in terms of your experience with Belt Road, one of the concerns is, yes, this is a China-led initiative. What will be the opportunity for American, Western companies, European companies, in participating in Belt Road itself? You have so sophisticated project management and other systems from from that experience. What are you finding in terms of clients of yours who are participating in Belt Road? And what are some of your suggestions of ways to make that participation even more robust?
Thanks for the question. It's a really good one. When you look at the Belt and Road Initiative, I mean, to the comments that were made earlier, globalization is not new. It's not a new phenomenon. But the way countries and companies are globalizing is clearly changing. And this initiative has been in the works for a few years. When you look at the growth of outbound Chinese M&A over the last 5 years, it's been nothing short of spectacular. Like, China's truly come on the world scene as a global M&A player to be reckoned with. This year, because of regulations both within China and in the US, there's been a catching of your collective breath, if you may. But I think globalization is here to stay, and China as a global M&A player is here to stay. And in terms of what we are seeing in the marketplace are the whole gamut of deal making, right? Right from 100% ownership, Shuo, to your point, to companies taking stake, joint ventures, taking early stage capital, taking late stage capital. There is a lot of activity amongst the financial buyer community, both in terms of traditional private equity players as well as state-owned enterprises in China, which have a lot of financial capital and are starting to flex their muscles in the world M&A stage. What I'm seeing amongst my clients is a greater appetite for deal making, both for inbound deals and outbound deals out of China. Mm-hmm. But there are several operational issues that have to be dealt with. Mm-hmm. And when you think about the program management challenge of executing these cross-border deals, there are a number of different challenges that companies have to wrestle with. Right from the diligence stage, where the information sharing is not always easy or facilitated well, there are cultural and language barriers that companies have to overcome, all the way down to when you're talking about price and trying to agree on value. There's huge differences in opinion depending on which stakeholders you talk to, all the way down to when you actually get into the post-merger world and you're trying to integrate organizations and systems and cultures and processes. They present enormous challenges for all the players involved. Excellent. And when you look at the local players, there is not enough of an appreciation for the depth of these challenges, right? People think that as soon as a deal is done and is signed, that it's all done and we can walk away. But that's when a lot of the challenges actually begin. And 70% of the work is done after the deal is signed in terms of bringing these companies operationally together in order to make them hum and live up to the deal potential that they signed up for. So what we are seeing is also increased regulation from the US in terms of CFIUS and other government agencies that are starting to oversee foreign investment, trying to understand what are the security aspects of these. And we've seen extraordinary challenges that companies have had to go through. In the last deal that I executed, it was a carve-out of a US business in China, and we were integrating it with a joint venture in China and selling it to a financial buyer. The US company itself had been going through a series of divestitures, and they were selling different parts of their business to various buyers. But the underlying financial systems and the operational systems hadn't been split. Mm. And so you had a situation where if you didn't have the right cybersecurity controls, you could have an operator in China go all the way through companies in 4 or 5 different spheres. Mm. And so we had to put an operational team to actually make sure that the right controls were there, the right security protocols were there to make sure that the right parties had access to the right information. So there are some of these things that no one even thinks about when they're doing deals that become huge challenges once you execute a deal. That being said, I don't think any of these are stopping some of the more ambitious players in the market. I think China is making very strategic investments where they want to gain capability, where they want to expatriate technology, they're trying to get access to the right markets. So there's some very smart investments being made today, and I think it's upon this community here to make sure we continue with that type of growth and energy.
And I think you find also, as opposed to say 10 years ago, Chinese companies now are really integrating themselves in terms of their management team with many professionals who are based and who are from the US itself. And even internationally, for example, the Pirelli tire acquisition as well. The integration of that acquisition was led by the Italian side. So I think in terms of adaptation and post-merger integration, I think you're finding a much more flexible attitude as what is best for the company and what is the best for harnessing the human capital and creating post-merger an effective management team. From a Japan perspective, you know, when you hear now of Belt Road, when you hear also of the opportunities here in the United States and the challenges, what resonates? What comes to mind?
I'm from Tokyo, yes. 10 years ago, I met Mr. Wang Wei. This is a very good challenge in Japan and China. China, Korea, and Japan. We have found the start of the big project, this one. Mm-hmm. I'm very glad now the American M&A Association is enjoying. My English is very poor.
No, please.
And
far better than my Japanese.
It's just a very good time. And in Japan and the American stock, it's a good time to do something about M&A deal by the market.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Alex, you know, from someone who works on the, mostly on the sell side mandate as well, what are you experiencing as we talk about challenges? So for example, in the early part of this year, you have 2 deals from China that created. And to some extent, they were attributed to the change in policy from the Chinese side. You have, for example, and there may have been other reasons because of the underlying issues with the company, LeEco's acquisition that aborted of Vizio for $2 billion. You have Wanda's potential acquisition, which also aborted, of Dick Clark Productions for, I think it was $1.1 billion as well. You have a more stringent CFIUS environment today than perhaps existed. What are some of the, the challenges that you face in terms of the mandate and in working with Chinese companies as they look to acquire companies in the United States or in Europe?
I would say I've been with BDA for about 5 years. We mainly do cross-border M&A involving Asia. And in some ways, over those 5 years, the interest from Chinese companies in US companies has really only increased. And I'd attribute that to a couple of factors. Firstly, I think compared to investment opportunities in China, investment opportunities in the US now are seen as having a better return. Back in 2005, 2010 even, everything in China was growing all over the place. There was loads you could invest in. I think now a lot of that sort of crazy growth period has passed, and people are looking more outside of China. And also what companies in the US can bring into China, particularly in advanced materials, advanced technologies, that then can be leveraged within the Chinese market. And you put all that together, and it generally means that Chinese companies can bring a pretty attractive price to the table in a US process. Now, the problem with that is almost in parallel with the interest and the rationale increasing, the actual mechanics of getting a deal done with a Chinese counterparty, particularly from a regulatory side, have become more difficult. It's not impossible, and often that extra price can justify jumping through the extra hurdles. But as Selig said, CFIUS is a pain almost across the board, generally because even when the acquisition doesn't seem to be an obvious CFIUS candidate, there will still generally be a legal view that you cannot rule out the fact that CFIUS might rule against you. And that tends to be a concern both from the Chinese and the US side. Secondly, currency controls continue to be an issue. Chinese companies will generally profess to having very good local connections, to being supported by the government, they can get the money out. That may be true. In our experience, you never really know until you actually go to the bank and ask what the condition is going to be on that particular day. So I think in summary, one of the things we always tell clients at BDA is we think it's definitely a value to include Chinese buyers in the process. We generally like to start with them as early as we can to try and quantify these CFIUS and other issues up front, because oftentimes the deal does make sense for both parties. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. And as to CFIUS, that's, I think, something that we all will be following, because the definition of national security and the facts on the ground changes. As you may be aware, last week, the Foreign Investment Risk Review Modernization Act was introduced, the same bill, both in the House, both in the Senate, bipartisan support. And Shuo had mentioned, for example, perhaps passive or indirect investment by Chinese companies in Silicon Valley. But now I think what part of the intent of the legislation is to codify even more what has been a practice on CFIUS, to look at indirect relationships as well. So for example, if a limited partnership investment in a Silicon Valley technology company is also married with rights of first refusal or technology transfer in China as well, it is something that will be getting heightened scrutiny. So I think we're going to be seeing developments on the CFIUS side. One of the problems with CFIUS also in terms of the administration today is the fact that still many senior positions have not been filled by this administration. So you do not have the full complement of the CFIUS people at the table of, I think, the 26 agencies that contribute to the CFIUS process itself. But that's something I think we need to monitor. One point also is the issue of reciprocity, collaboration. And much has been made, I think, by President Xi and at the Party Congress in terms of, and of course in the meetings that just took place with the Trump administration, is in terms of opening up of Chinese markets. And we will see what results, but there have been already some indications that have been positive. Wang Yang, who's the vice premier, in an article published Friday in the People's Daily, talked about an even playing field for foreign companies, for procurement in other respects. Talked also about doing away with the need for technology transfer as the price of entrance to be able to do business in China. These sentiments have been expressed in the past, but what is different this time is the level of seniority, the vice premier having said that. Also, apparently, the hurdles on financial services companies owning a majority in a joint venture, it looks like that's coming down, and it looks like now, for example, Goldman Sachs will be able to go from 49% to a majority position in its joint venture in China. So we are seeing certain relaxation, hopefully, that will be far broader in the pharma area, in the agriculture area, in all these areas where I think you're hearing from US companies, from European companies as well, that the time has really come about to have a far more level playing field in terms of international access to Chinese markets themselves. Does anybody have a comment in terms of how they think this will evolve over the next few months?
Yeah, I actually, I cannot predict, but Mr. Wang and I were in Dean of Marshall Business School in USC last Thursday. Jim Ellis was one of the 65 team members with President Nixon when they visited China in 1977. At the time, Jim was young, and the group leader asked him, do you have a girlfriend? You need to prepare that when you go there, you will never come back safe as a whole piece. Seriously, this is real life. And he told me, he said, he answered back, he said, I don't have a girlfriend. I'm willing to contribute my life for the country. They went with President Nixon to China. At the time, China is completely closed to the United States. Myself is a beneficiary of that visit. Since that visit, China opened to Western world, and China initiated Go to the Modern Chinese Life. Science and technology become the initiative. I was at the middle school at the time, and I was able to go to physics class, math class, and starting to get education. Also, I was able to go to the United States to have my graduate degree over here and then worked here. So what I see from 1977 till today is a vast exploration of China, the China economy. Today, China economy cannot be ignored by any country. And I think what as we're looking at here, financial group, what do we need to work towards? It's not to be afraid of legislation. I believe legislation will adapt to economy development. What do we need to do right now with the Belt and Road Initiative is to work together, join force, basically help the development countries, development regions, brought a better life, better economy to those areas. Therefore, profit and benefit will come to those money who initiated these changes. So that's where I think, with that belief, you will make money and deals will come back. So the vision of Belt and Road starts from there. I think will eventually end a better world.
I love ending on an optimistic and an eloquent note. My thanks to the audience, and of course my thanks to each of you on the panel for a very stimulating discussion. Thank you so much.